The next session is What's in the Mind of a Dota 2 Mastermind? A pro's perspective. We learn from the best to ever do it, Dominic Black-Reitmeyer, as he shares his storied career, learning experiences, and of course the secrets behind his extraordinary success in one of the most challenging and competitive arenas, Dota 2. So he hails from Germany, he's freelance in his pursuits, he belongs to no one but himself, answers only to himself, and hopefully he'll answer a couple of your questions today as well. Please give a huge round of applause for Dominic Black-Reitmeyer.
Thank you, Laura. Much appreciated. So, what's in the mind of a Dota 2 mastermind? Not very much right now, but luckily I wrote it all down. So first, we're going to have an introduction of myself, some of my major achievements and milestones. Next up, we'll go a little bit in depth into Dota 2. So some of you guys that don't play the game might be a little bored or it might be a little overwhelming, but stick with me, or maybe even try out the game yourself. It's very fun. And third is, what does it mean to be a Dota 2 professional player, and what does it mean to be a professional esports player in general? So let's get started right away. Lots to talk about, not that much time. So as you already said, my name is Dominic Reitmeyer. I go under the name of Black. You have to add the little caret as well. Very important, because every gamer has their own pride in it, of course. Currently 30 years old, and in China I acquired 2 titles, Little B-God and Torturer. So Little B-God is because I was a big fan of a player named Burning, and he's named B-God in China. I was much younger than him, but I basically copied his style and his heroes to the T. Perfection, even. And then, well, all the Chinese fans gave him the nickname Little B-God because I'm younger than him. Now, Torturer sounds a little bit mean, perhaps, but I was the leader of most of my teams, and the training approach worked, so I adopted it in most of them. Some meals might have been skipped, some fines might have been imposed, but usually just once. Because after the first time, most people, well, they don't want to have it happen again. World Traveler and Mr. GPM, we'll talk about those a little bit later, because it will make more sense then. Currently, I'm still a professional player, a coach, and an analyst. I've been doing it for roughly 2 decades at this point. And as a side occupation, I am a personal trainer and a nutritionist, because I thought it's a very nice combination. You sit all day, so why not get off your bum, train a bit at the gym, and know what you're eating. You know, very important to stay healthy, of course, as well. I like animals, especially my cat. Love him more than anything. Music, sports, fitness, and games. Very cliche, but what can you do? But the dislikes, I can still remember the first time I flew. It was absolutely amazing. I was like, Mom, I'm flying to France. It's going to be epic. Now, I'm like, Mom, I'm flying to Korea. Not that I don't like Korea, you know, but flying in general gets pretty tedious if you do it a lot. I'm sure people that fly a lot will know what I mean. Next up, we got some of my own milestones. So 11.5K MMR is not a lot anymore now, but at the time I reached it, it was about the 10th highest in the entire world, which was pretty good at the time. But yeah, nowadays it's like 13,000 or even more, so people are going a little bit crazy on the rankings. I was also the first foreign player to play in a Chinese team, and successfully so. I lived in China for 4 years. One of my probably most successful times I've ever had throughout my entire career. I was also the first player to play in every major Dota 2 region, like Europe, America, China, Asia, and the CIS region. And then the achievement I'm probably the proudest of is leading a team of 4 unproven, very young Chinese players and bringing them to their first ever the international. Some of them were even considered some of the best players in the world, and one of them, in particular, I'm very proud of him, he got second at the international, and yeah, almost won it for me. As a mentor, you know, it makes me feel very good when people that you teach go very far, of course. And as I previously alluded to, I was the leader of many teams that were successfully international. Personal achievements. I have never won TI, unfortunately. I came very close, but didn't win. You know the saying, if you didn't win it, you lost. No such thing as second winner. But the happiest memory they'll never forget, even though the prize pool wasn't as big, was the first ESL New York that I won. I remember after we beat EG in the finals 2-1, I let loose a war cry that you could even hear on the streams. And everybody was like, whoa, did I just hear a black screen there? I was like, yeah, that was me. Now let's go into the Dota 2 portion, because as I said, there's a lot to talk about, not a whole lot of time. Personally, I accumulated more than 55,000 hours just in the game. So you can imagine it's very complicated, very deep, and yeah, 45 minutes will barely scrape the surface of all of it. So first, let's start with the roles. The carry role is the role that I played throughout most of my career. It gets the most resources in the game and the most protection in the game as well. It's considered the late game insurance because obviously if you get the most resources, you'll be the strongest hero later on into the game. You're very weak early on, you get protected by all your teammates. But because you get so much prioritization, you are absolutely not allowed to make any sort of itemization mistakes. If you do that, you wasted one of your power spikes, your team is probably going to fall behind, and you lose a game as a snowball effect. And as I alluded to, it takes also longer than other roles to come online, because you're weak early on. You're basically an investment for your team. Later on, you will become much, much stronger. And then you must also make absolutely sure that you use every power spike that you have, because, as I said, all the resources get funneled to you. One mistake, your team will snowball behind, and then the enemy team's carry probably did the right thing, and you'll just end up losing that way. It's a role that has a lot of responsibility, especially as the game goes into the later stages of the game. Next up, we got the mid role. It gets the most experience, because obviously he lanes alone in the mid lane. It's always a 1v1 lane, and you have a lot of responsibility helping out your side lanes, who are pressured the most. Because most of the time, the support will help you, get a little bit of an advantage early on, and then after that, you obviously got to repay your team, gank the lanes, help your carry get some space, and get back into the game that way. Losing and winning a lane, especially in the mid lane, can lead to really one-sided games. Because most of the mid heroes are snowball heroes. That means with a little bit of an experience and goal advantage, they can just run around and destroy and disrupt the entire map, pretty much. Very precise communication is also needed, because you can, as you can imagine, if you're very over-leveled, you make a mistake, you don't include your supports in a rotation, you die, suddenly your game is ruined. Nobody wants that to happen. Now, next up, we got the offlane. The offlane is usually the initiation role of a team and also the tank role. That means you go in first, you give your team information, make sure that your backline heroes can play the game properly, because without information, you can't really find a good initiation. Most of the time, you build aura items, and as I said, tank items, just so you can support your team or mitigate the damage your team receives, or also mitigate the damage that the enemy team deals, obviously. It's a very, very teamfight-focused role. Usually, they don't deal a lot of individual damage. It's more like AoE crowd control. They're very strong in the early stages of the game. So most of the time, they will bully the carry out of the lane until the mid lane comes, rotates, and then obviously helps them get back into the game. And because you're so strong in the early game, you do not have a lot of time, or rather, you do not have a lot of room to make mistakes in the early game, can't really recover from them. Considered as the Roma is our fourth role, the support role. Most of the time, they will start in the off lane together with the off laner, and after that, they'll rotate to the safe lane, rotate to the mid lane, wherever they're needed. They're basically the role that's the most active, and they're also the role that can suit the team's need as they need. He can be the initiator, he can be the burst hero, but he can also be the tank. So lots of people enjoy the 4 role, of course, because you have a lot of freedom in your itemization and in your playstyle. But of course, it also comes with its own risks, because if you're rotation doesn't work out, you fall behind in levels, fall behind in gold, suddenly you become a useless hero on the map. Next up, we got the hard support. The hard support gets the least amount of experience. It's very, very positioning independent because of that. You're very squishy, you don't really get the gold that your other teammates have, you don't have the HP pool. Anybody wants to jump you, you basically die in 1 second. The good thing is, It functions very, very well without gold and experience. That's why it's a support hero. You usually just need your level 6. Once you're level 6, you can do pretty much whatever you want on the map, and you'll have to coordinate with your mid laner as well as your offlaner and support to really make plays happen around the map. This is the most sacrificial role in the game, and probably the least popular role as well. Nobody really wants to be a support player. So, resource management on the lane. Most people don't know this or don't think about it, but health, mana, and cooldowns are also considered resources. You have an innate mana regen of at least 1, and sometimes even a bit more than 1. So every second you spend not using your mana basically means it's a wasted mana. As soon as the lane starts, you want to use the mana to harass the enemy, get the last hit, whatever need there might be. And then leveling up before the opponent is absolutely crucial. You can imagine, once you're level 2, you have an additional spell. Let's just say you deal twice the damage. Of course, if you have it before your opponent, you can get the jump on them, get the kill, get the lane advantage, and they might never be able to recover from that again. So reaching level 2 before them, super, super important. Then use your gold as soon as you have it. I'm very guilty of this myself. Until I moved to China and had a professional coach, I did it all the time. I hoarded all my gold, lost the lane because of it. I was very, very, very greedy, as you can see there. That was one of my ex-teams, and yeah, I got scolded a lot for being too greedy, let's put it that way. When it works out, it's perfect. You get a lot of money, a lot of gold, but most of the time it doesn't. And as you can imagine, as a pro player, you want to be as consistent as possible. Consistency is the name of the game, basically, which also means you should always refill your mana and HP as necessary, as soon as you can, because without mana and HP, you cannot win the lane. Now, creep waves for most people are just gold. Of course, creep waves are gold, but they're much more than that. There are mobile wards. As soon as you push out the creep wave, they run down the lanes and give you all that information that you need. If the enemy is not there, then you can narrow down where they're going to go, potentially where they're going to gank you from. So pushing out the creep waves at all times is a must. I was also very guilty of that once again. Jungling feels safe, it feels nice. You're just standing in the jungle, killing some creeps, but for your own team's benefit, you really don't want to do that. Creep waves are super, super important in Dota, and as I said, you need to make sure you always prioritize pushing them out. Next up, we got creep aggro. Now this one, you can probably spend like 10,000 hours on it, and you would still not perfect it. It's one of the most complicated mechanics in Dota, but it is really, really, really important to master, because if you do, you can elevate your laning to the next stage. And even some of the pro players now, they're still not very good at this. It's something I see a lot, and something that always is a little pet peeve of mine when I see it. I'm like, you could just book a coaching session with me, and I would get you good at it. It functions globally, and at the same time, you can also de-aggro yourself by A-clicking. I got a couple of videos showing everything. It's very complicated. It requires vision to pull off. It can assist you in tower dives, and it can help with creep equilibrium as well. So here's going to be the first video. So here, this is just how creep aggro works. I basically A-click the opponent, all the creeps start hitting me. That's the gist of it. It has a 500 AoE and a 3-second cooldown. Now, second slide, we're going to talk about how it can help with the creep equilibrium, which means I'm pulling the enemy creeps towards me to put the creep wave into a safer position so I can get the last hits easier. As you can see here, I pull them further back, so now the enemy hero doesn't have the range to harass me. I can easily and safely farm. Now, third slide is showing you that it indeed works on towers as well. Here you can see, I click the hero, tower starts shooting me. But as I previously said, it only has a range of 500, which means the attack range of a tower is 700. If you click on him early enough, the tower will not start hitting you until 3 seconds later, which is why it assists in tower dives. Oh, I didn't know I'm on that video, but apparently I am. Now, this video is to showcase that you can de-aggro yourself by A-clicking on a creep. You see the tower hitting me now. Whoops. Go back. Okay, I can't go back. Anyway, tower's hitting me, then I A-click a creep, the tower stops hitting me. It's a very important mechanic in Dota, because obviously you're going to be tower diving a lot. You want to, especially the carry is very weak early on. You want to kill him off as many times as you can. It's a very, very important mechanic to learn. As I said, easily 10,000, maybe more hours go into learning it. Because I played, as I said, 55,000 hours. I'm very good at it, but I'm nowhere near master of it. Okay, next up, we got the Dota economy. So pulling stacking is obviously super important, especially during the laning phase. Every time you get a pull-off, it's a huge advantage against your opponents. You get an XP lead, and we spoke about how important it is to reach level 2 before your opponents. The same goes level 3, level 4, and then level 6 is your next biggest power spike. And of course, stacking, your teammate that stacks for you gets 30% of the experience and gold that you get. So stacking is very, very economically viable. Then, of course, the whole map control, we'll talk about that a bit later. Pressuring lanes, as I said, pushing out creep waves, making sure you get all the vision advantage so you can farm more gold in the jungle. Very, very important. Itemization, you can itemize to be very greedy. There's items that just help you farm. So it's also a very important aspect of economy. You need to balance both. You can't just be super greedy and not be ready to fight, because otherwise you're going to be useless here on team fights. And then next up we have Tormentors, which is a little side objective. Every time you, we're going to be a bit kid-friendly. Every time you defeat one, you get 1,400, you get a shard, which is basically worth 1,400 gold. Very, very important, especially early on for your support heroes, who we said don't get so much gold early on. And then we have bounty runes that spawn every 5 minutes. As the game progresses in length, they get more and more, they yield more and more gold. Next up, we're going to talk about map control. Map control is really, really important, of course, because the more you restrict the enemy side of the map, the less access to resources they have, and the more access to resources you have. So you can do that by placing and protecting wards, smoking out, and getting into a positional advantage. Again, this is all very technical, but any Dota player knows what I mean, hopefully. Dewarding the enemy wards, because obviously a vision advantage. Like you will see at a lot of tournaments, there's these massive plays, like 5-man echo slams, all that just purely happens. Of course, the player is very good, but the vision control is everything. Gaining control over watchers for the same reason. They give vision, good vision usually leads to Roshan kill. Roshan kill leads to even more map control because you have an additional life. So making use of twin gates, that's the newest addition to Dota 2. You basically just stand somewhere, you channel for 4 seconds, and you teleport to the other end of the map. Very handy tool, pretty broken tool as well. And then destruction of enemy towers. I'll showcase that in the next slide. We have a good overview of the map. And then, as always, pushing the creep waves in. Creep waves are map control, creep waves are money. So here's the Dota map. Pretty lengthy, pretty big, as you can see. But I'm just going to use this as a tool to showcase you how important map control really is. So with this first line, you can see the map is split in half, 50-50. No team has an advantage. Second line, now you can see the left side has about 70% of the map, and you can see how small it suddenly feels like for the right side, for the Dire, right? They have very limited access to resources, and they really got to fight to make sure that they regain half of the control of the map, because otherwise they'll just get shoved out, probably lose 1,000 or 2,000 gold every minute, and ultimately just lose the match because of it. So here's just the difference between the two. It looks very small, but in the game you will see, or you will feel, it's very restrictive. Next up, we got creep waves. So look at those 3 creep waves. Imagine you are the Radiant side, the left side. The creep waves are very, very pushed in. You basically have no information, right? You see nothing, because everything is in front of your base. The enemy controls about 70-75% of the map. Same as before, it feels very restrictive. You can't really get out to get resources, and anywhere you go, you're probably going to be outnumbered and killed off immediately. Now, if you take the second position of the creeps here, you can see once you regain the advantage, you push out all the creep waves to about 60-70% of the map. Suddenly, you are in control because the enemy can't make any moves. The creeps are giving you all the information you have. If they want to make a move on you, you know exactly where they're going to come from. They're going to come from the middle of the 2 creep waves. You can prepare properly. You're going to have a massive advantage in the team fight, which again is why it's so important to keep those creep waves pushed out. So Next up, we're going to talk about hero matchups. Hero matchups are absolutely crucial in Dota, as you can imagine, especially in the mid lane. Just so much snowball potential. So we have 124 heroes. Every hero has at least 4 spells, some of them even more. And you can imagine that's a lot of different spells to learn. We have 208 items with different active and passive components, and you need to know all of them. What they do, in what situation they do it, and what situation they trigger or don't trigger, like how can you counter certain items. It's a lot of brain juggling to do. And then, of course, you need to learn the cooldown, the ranges, the buff and debuff duration, and amount of each spell, how much healing it does, how much damage it does. We don't even want to talk about it. As that 55,000 hours is a lot of hours, which is why I would recommend you want to learn like 5, maybe 6 heroes, max, and you want to master them. Master all the ranges, master all the spells, master all the situations where you can use the hero in. Because for your average player, that is already more than you need, basically. Like, no player exists that I know of, including myself. I mean, I can play every hero, but not on a pro level, of course. I don't know anybody that can. It's just way too many heroes, way too many variables, way too many factors going into it. So it's just very, very difficult to really figure out all the situations, which is why we have different roles and different players. So now we're going to go into the quickfire tips. Those are just some of the things that I realized a lot of players do, or do wrongly, or don't do at all. So the first up is a very easy one. You plant the ironwood tree, and you just eat it. It gives you double the region, and it's a very, very important thing to do, especially during the laning phase. Most people don't do it because they feel like they're wasting money, but that's obviously not really true, because, again, double region early into the game, very important. Do not be greedy. 50 gold is nothing in the grand scheme of things. Next up, ranged heroes can move into melee range to get an easier time of CSing. You can just imagine, here, we have a creep right over here, or here, right? Like if I shoot him, it's going to travel a bit longer to hit him. If it's right in front of me, it's going to hit him straight away. So it takes away the travel time of the projectile, makes it much easier to CS. A question I get all the time. Quelling Blade costs only 100 gold and gives you 8 damage. Best damage for gold spent in the game possible. That's why it keeps getting nerfed. It's just too good of an item. We have unreliable gold in Dota and reliable gold. Unreliable gold means you lose that gold when you die. Reliable gold, you do not lose when you die. So every time you're about to get killed in a team fight or in a gank, you need to spend your gold, because that prevents you from losing your unreliable gold because you spend it straight away. Very, very important, and you will see every pro player basically, as soon as they die, they just spam the buy button, and all the gold is gone. Next up is, you gotta use control groups. So many people are just lazy on the keyboard, and they don't use control groups, especially when they play summoning heroes. Have a hotkey for your courier, have a hotkey for your hero, and all other summon units that you might have. It will improve your efficiency when it comes to controlling, farming around the map, pushing out creep waves, everything. There's no discussion about it. You need to do it. As I previously mentioned already in the economy tab, stack and pull timings are super, super important. You can stack a camp. How many times have I ever seen a stacked camp? Probably 10 times or so. And as I said, 30% times 10, you get about 300% of what you would originally get. Just a massive amount of economy boost. And then, obviously in Dota, not just in Dota, any team game, or even some single-player games as well, you need to be a good communicator. It really is like a relationship. Like, if you don't treat your other teammates nice, you're basically bound to lose from the very beginning. And yeah, it always pays off to be nice. If they make a mistake, don't scold them for it, but be encouraging. Trust me, everybody knows when they made a mistake. Like, if I run in and die without doing anything, I'm not going to be like, yeah, I'm going to do that again. Next time I'll be more careful, of course. You don't need to scold me for it. It's pretty obvious. Okay, then, take breaks between games. This one is super important, and especially as a pro gamer, I'm very guilty of this. Like, you think you're so much better than all the pub players. You think you're losing because of them. You click Q again. You're super tilted. You go into the game. And yeah, you basically ruin the game for your team. Happens probably to everybody at some point. And that's something you absolutely shouldn't do. Obviously, you're causing self-hurt because you're not practicing properly, but you're also just ruining the game for everybody into the game. So take some break, 5, 10 minutes, take a walk, do some stretching, whatever. Make sure you're actually ready to play the next game. And I mean, I already sort of spoke about that. Stretch whenever you're able to. Like wrist health is a real thing, especially for gamers that play extended hours. I know a lot of my ex-teammates, they had wrist problems, they had tennis elbows, because you go through the same motion the entire time. Stretching and making sure that you stay healthy with nutrition, with exercise and everything. We'll get into that a bit more later as well. Really, really important as a professional gamer. And then obviously the last tip, it's a little bit of a gamer meme, but you just gotta get good. What does it mean when somebody tells you to get good? It means if you really wanna improve, you don't just play the game. Because getting good is so much more than just playing. You gotta analyze your replays, you gotta figure out what mistakes you make. Maybe you even wanna implement some of the pro players' play into your own game, so you have to watch their replays first, see your similarities. There's, like, as I said, there's way, way more that goes into it than just playing the game, which is something a lot of people always take for granted. They're like, oh, I would love to be a pro gamer, you're just playing the game. Well, yes, that's part of it, but really, you're forgetting all the boring parts, which is like all the behind-the-scenes work, basically. So next up, we're going to talk about Dota 2 as an esport and how life is like as a professional Dota 2 player. Mind you guys, it was about 18 years ago when I became a pro player, so things changed a lot, how it is now. Like, people are much more health aware, and they're more aware of having like a social life, which I did not. Let's talk about the responsibilities first, okay? If you're a pro player, you are a role model. And it's very important that you know this. There's a ton of young people, 10 years, 12 years, teenagers, young adults. You will be their role model. So how you behave, how you portray yourself in public, is how they'll act. And I'm not going to point any fingers, but we have a lot of people, unfortunately, in many scenes. We don't get any like training in public speaking or how to behave in public. And again, we spend most of our time playing games, so we're pretty awkward socially, especially when we're younger. I usually say, deduct 10 years from a pro gamer's age, and you got their actual social age. You know? So when you're 25, you're about 15, socially. At least that was the case for me. So again, it is so important that you portray yourself nicely, that you don't go like on a rampage. We have had incidents of, well, I probably shouldn't go there. But no, we had like a lot of really big issues where they got fined by the organization. Some players even got kicked by the organization or banned from tournaments just because they are behaving in a very bad way that should not be acceptable. Now, next up, obviously, your sponsors are a very, very important part of your existence. You gotta represent them in the best way possible, which means if they ask you to wear this or do this, you have to do it to the best of your ability. Doesn't mean you can always do it, but that's why you have to discuss with them. That's what contracts are for. Yada yada. Shoot advertisement videos and pictures for the sponsors, whether it's like of a keyboard or of a headphone, anything like that. Next up, you always have to be ready to play your best. That doesn't just mean that you are ready to play the game, but you also got to stay healthy, you got to stay in a good mindset. Being ready to play for me means you can 100% focus on the game, you're not tilted, there's no distractions, you just play the best possible. And lastly, it's pretty obvious, especially in a team game, you have to be a good team player. If you're not a good team player, you shouldn't be playing a team game to begin with, and nobody wants to work with you. Unfortunately, I had that issue myself when I was a bit younger, but let's not get there. So, risk and risk mitigation. First, I know a lot of people, a lot of ex-teammates too, that actually quit school, didn't make it as a pro, and now they're kind of screwed in life. And I feel bad for them, but the mitigation to that is you finish your school education first, and then you pursue a full-time pro career as a backup plan, which is basically my second point too. You need a backup plan. If you don't have one, professional career is very risky. You need something that you can fall back on. Otherwise, your life is pretty much just over. There's not much you can do. It's very hard to get into universities without a decent degree from school. Give yourself the chance to have a backup plan. Very important. Next up, set yourself a time limit. I want to be a pro in 2 years. After 2 years, you assess your situation. How far have I gotten? Not far enough. Okay, I'm done. Or, actually, I went quite far. Let me try for another half year. You get the idea. Keep yourself healthy at all times, which means do whatever you got to do. Take your vitamins, do your wrist stretches, do your exercises, whatever you need to do. Have an active social life. I was very guilty of this myself. I just bunked in at home, played games all the time. Basically left me with no social life. And that weighs on you mentally, especially like in your 20s. You feel like a little lonely, you feel like you don't really have friends around, all that. It's very, very important to keep active socially. But as I said, new generation, they're much more aware of this, hopefully. And then stay with family and friends as long as possible. That doesn't mean that you should like be a mommy's boy or something like that, but financially, it takes a lot of weight off your shoulders. If you can stay with your parents, they pay the rent for you. I realized myself when I was in China, away from my parents, it was very tough to get by financially. And yeah, it pressured me a lot mentally, which is something you don't want because it distracts you, and yeah, it impacts your performance negatively. It can impact your performance negatively, and we don't want that. Again, pro player, you want to have as much consistency as possible. Next up, you got to be realistic. Are you good enough to play the game professionally, or are you not? Less than 1% of the players who ever try actually make it. And again, that goes into line with set yourself a deadline. 2 years, you try as hard as you can to achieve being a pro player. After 2 years, you ask yourself the question, am I good enough now? If the answer is no, you stop. You have to stop. Because if you don't stop, you're going to keep going for another 2 years, another 2 years, another 2 years, and it's not going to yield anything unless you get super lucky. There are some stories like that, but as I said, really, really risky. Make sure you stay realistic. And that's actually the biggest problem I ever encountered, the next one. I was considered one of the best players, maybe even the best player in the world for about 3 or 4 months when I competed in China. And you just get this adrenaline high, this mental high, that your brain is always trying to recreate. So even now, when I'm 30 years old, I sometimes get this itch, this competitive itch, and you just can't get it out of you. You know, you want to compete again, you want to win again, you want to feel that high again, which blends in pretty well with the first session that we had today. Addiction and passion, I personally feel like it's like you need to be somewhere in between, and you need to be able to sort of filter that out. Because if you can't, it might haunt you for a lot longer than you actually want. And as I said, I still don't really know how to get rid of it. I know a lot of professional sports players have a similar issue. Once they retire, they just want to keep playing, want to keep replicating that high they had, but they just can't do it. So now we have a couple of different approaches that I know can be successful in pursuing your pro career. So we have the 50-50 approach, part-time school, part-time pro. I know one person exactly that managed it this way, because truth be told, you have a lot more time than this. You know, like part-time pro, part-time school, you have like half your day left to really, try harder, invest more time into it. The next approach, full-time pro and part-time work or school, is an approach that most people take because obviously you need money to be able to sustain yourself, and then you still want to be a pro player, obviously. So you spend a lot of time playing, and you spend half the time just trying to earn money to sustain yourself, get that financial burden out of you. The next approach was my personal approach. That's the 100-100, which means full-time work and full-time pro. It's very, very demanding. For about 2 years, I probably had like 4 or 5 hours of sleep, but it was the only way I could have pursued it, because I'm a very Like, I believe that I can always work harder, which is an issue I had when I was younger, but I basically always want to push myself to the limit as much as I can. So I pursued this way. I know a couple of other people that did as well, and luckily it worked out for me, but you really don't have any life. You have no social life. You just play and go to school. You play and go to work, and that's it. Can't interact with friends, can't interact with family. So I don't recommend that one. The second approach is a much more sustainable one, and sustainability is what we're all after. Finances. So the prize money, at least in Dota, it's not as bad in other games, very top-heavy. Usually about 50, 60, sometimes even up to 80% is in the top 3. Which means if you're not a top 3 team, your prize money that you earn is going to be very little. The tier 1 scene is very luxurious. A lot of money in there, which is good, of course. But the tier 2, 3, and below scene, there isn't really a whole lot of support there, which makes it very unsustainable to be, not a tier 1 pro. Which, of course, how can you guarantee that you will be a tier 1 pro? You can't do that. So you got to know that if you ever want to become a Dota pro, that's the system. That's how it has been from the very beginning. It's not going to change. Next up, we got team sponsorships, of course. When you play for a team, they ask you to do like a marketing campaign. You do it, you get paid some extra money by them, and that's like another source of income. And for the more popular players, or people that also stream on the side, there's individual partnerships with like Razer or Logitech or whoever wants to collaborate with you. And then you can like sell your own merchandise as well. But at that point, you're probably a very established player already, and you're in that tier 1 area, so you're pretty well off at that point. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the benefits of being a pro player and the skills that you acquire along the way. Obviously, you have a lot of time during your off-season. After TI, every team has about like a month plus where they don't need to do anything. Of course, no tournaments, what you need to practice for, we're just waiting for a new patch anyway. Lots of free time to spend with your family, go on vacation, anything like that. Obviously, I made a lot of friends here. I made a lot of friends during my pro career. I made a lot of friends during my casting career. Esports will give you so much exposure to other people, to other cultures, and it's absolutely amazing. Like, as I said, I've been pretty much in every major region. I visited almost every country thanks to esports, and it just, when other people talk about their lives, I just feel like, yeah, I've done that. Oh, I've been there too. Yeah, that was great when I was there as well. I just feel like my life at the age of 30 feels like the life of some other people when they're like 70. They did some world travels. So I'm very, very blessed to have this career path available to me. Obviously, as I said, you travel a lot. Visit so many different countries, so many different continents. It's absolutely great, and I wouldn't want to change any of the memories. You also heavily develop skills, obviously, like problem solving, critical thinking. Your reflexes get much better. Your hand-eye coordination, all that will be very good, which can help you in future jobs, maybe even current jobs as well. And the team always makes its own schedule, meaning if you don't feel up to it, your team doesn't feel up to it, yeah, okay, let's get practice today. Probably don't want to do that too much, but in case you need, you can. And then obviously the potential to branch out into different areas, different jobs. Now, different job opportunities. Pro players, oftentimes, when they're done, they either transition into a streamer after they retire, or they become a shoutcaster or analyst at big tournaments. That's the personal path I went. That's the path many people go, even in traditional sports as well. So it's a very, very standard one. What a lot of people don't know, you don't have to be the best. You don't have to be a pro player to work in esports. There's so many different jobs. Content producers, there is tournament organizers, there's production teams, there's casters, there's hosts, there's thousands of different jobs that you can aspire to work in. So take advantage of that. If you love esports, go ahead, figure out what you want to do. There will be an opportunity for you. Now, closing words. Esports is a massive and growing business, which is good, of course, but we have to really make sure that we don't over-invest and that we keep it sustainable. A lot of companies just invested a ton of money, didn't get the returns they expected, and just left because they invested way too much at the very beginning. And I mean, I'm no businessman. I'll leave it up to you guys, but I know a lot of people overspent. Then remember where it all started. Okay? We all started with passion. When I was a kid, there was no tournaments, there was no money. What you got as a prize was like a mouse pad, at most. So the passion is absolutely important. I know it's a very big business, there's a lot of money in the business, but you need to be passionate about it, because otherwise it wouldn't even exist. And I kind of feel like a lot of players, a lot of tournament organizers, they kind of forget where it all came from, which is a bit sad to see for somebody that was in it, or is in it since the very beginning. And I just hope that we can sort of re-establish that. Because it's always about sharing the joy of your journeys, of your gaming experiences with other people around you. And then lastly, I want to ask everybody to just be better together. The communities, the players, the tournament organizers. Like, we're too harsh on each other, we're not nice enough, and communities should really feel like a safe haven, not somewhere where you're actually afraid to go to. Because there's a lot of toxicity, especially online, you have a lot of privacy, and if we could just be nicer and better to each other, I think it would benefit everybody in esports. Whether it's just a fan, or a player, or a tournament organizer, everybody would be happier together, and we would create much, much better products. It's going to conclude the presentation, so I thank you so much for your time. Hopefully it wasn't too boring, especially the Dota part. I know it can get very complicated. If there's any questions, you can always reach out to me, of course. But now we have question time, about 1 or 2 questions I think we can do. Are there any questions?
What would you consider as a great coach over a good coach or / analyst? I have 2 questions, so that's the first one.
Okay.
And the second one was if you can share how you were able to get over the challenges or the hurdle as someone from the West who integrated with a team of the East. Obviously, there's communication gaps and there's also culture gaps, so that's something that would be interesting that you could share.
Okay, so first off, what separates a good and a great coach? Very good question, because a lot of people really don't know. I think a good coach is good at the game, has good knowledge, and he kind of knows what you need to do. But there's a lot of people like that. In my opinion, a great coach is one that really bonds the team together, brings them on the same page. You're basically like the middleman for the team's problems. You're not just a player that is very good at the game, that can explain things to the team, but you are the guy that everybody goes to when there's a problem. Like, I didn't like what he did to me or how he spoke to me. As I said, socially, we're not that developed as gamers most of the time. We need somebody to help us, and that's him. That is the coach that will help us, but of course he still needs to be great at the game. There's different sort of coaches that we get nowadays too, performance coaches that we have seen earlier on. We have nutritionists now, we have personal trainers that help you with the training. But for a team coach, I think that is the most important, that you solve the team's problems while also still bringing the benefits of the knowledge. Because ultimately, you don't need to be the best player, you just need to be a very smart player and knowledgeable about the game. And then the second question, truth be told, my first day in China was rough, let's put it that way. I came from the airport, the entire team went into a taxi. I spent my first night in China in the hospital, by the way. I got into the taxi, my foot is still half out, he just drives full speed, my foot gets caught under the wheel, and it was a whole bloody mess. And I ended up in the hospital, as I said. So I was like, oh my God, what did I get myself into here? But obviously, it has nothing to do with the culture. I came there after studying online for 6 months. So I thought, my Chinese is not bad. I think I'm ready for this. You're not ready at all. Not ready at all. I didn't understand any of the accents. I didn't understand anything they said, because they have this thick accent that the people that you learn online from, they don't speak with that accent, So I was like, not sure what you're saying. And they don't speak English. Nobody speaks English. I wasn't allowed to speak English. Like, nobody was allowed to answer English, because I had to be integrated into the society to be better with the team and the environment. So I took I had a personal teacher. He taught me Chinese 2 hours every day. And I had that for about a year. And then after that, I could participate in team talks, team meetings, like all the stuff you need to do as a player, basically. Nowadays, my Chinese is not as good anymore, but I can still understand quite a bit. But I would say initially it's very difficult because all the Chinese fans also, they know you, but they don't accept you straight away. Until I got accepted, it took me probably about a year and 2 tournament wins where I showed that I can really compete with the best. And then after that, they became super passionate suddenly. They're like, oh, little B God, I love you. So the hate turned into passion, and I was like, oh, that's a very drastic change. But as I said, like some of my most fond memories, they're all from China. Like China has some incredibly passionate fans, same as Asia as well. And yeah, I absolutely loved it over there. But basically, TLDR, to overcome cultural differences, you need a lot of patience and a lot of willingness to integrate yourself. Because if you don't have that and you're very stubborn in your own ways, we had a couple of other people that tried to go to China as well, but they didn't adapt to any of their ways. They left within a month, obviously, because they didn't want to adapt to anything. Yeah, that's the most important, I think. The willingness to integrate yourself and the willingness to learn. Yeah, well, that's going to be it for me. I think I don't want to make anyone angry here. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it.